This week I got the opportunity to meet with a friend for lunch. Many of you are familiar with my friend Matt, and early in the pandemic, we wanted to transition our regular weekly lunch to something that was a little bit safer than eating in a restaurant. And so we developed this system of parking in a parking lot kind of next to each other with our windows down where we could still do lunch together. And as we've gone through different phases of this pandemic, we've eaten outside, and a couple of times when cases were low, we went back to eating in a restaurant. But this week and last week, he invited me to what he now refers to as a patrol car lunch. Even with the windows up, we called each other on the phone, and so we could see each other through the glass and had the half a second delay where the audio came through our phones, and shared lunch that way. And it was just a reminder that over the past months and years, we've found ways to adapt, things that we're happy to do to adapt to our situation, and things that maybe were a little bit more painful. But I wanted to start off with a discussion about some of the ways you have adapted to our current situation over the last couple of years. They can be sadder things or happier things. Just what are some of the ways that you've adapted over the last couple of years? I appreciate y'all sharing. Some of you are right there with me. And so this week, Amy shared a meme that she found that I initially found really discouraging, but also like, yeah, preach, sister. I didn't realize 2020 was going to be a trilogy. But what I think this trilogy has provided with us is, for all but the most bitter holders on to the past, we have become more flexible. We have started to adapt in ways we never imagined we would adapt, like meeting with friends on Zoom. What is Zoom? I don't want to talk to my friends on a screen. Now I do it all the time for work and fun. It's just part of our lives. And I think I've started to view this adaptability or flexibility kind of as the opposite of what you were just talking about, that negative holding on. I think it's really born out of a positive mindset. And the word that I think best describes that flexibility or adaptability combined with a positive mindset is my topic for the day. It's about dancing through the changes that inevitably come our way in life, be they positive from our perspective, thank you, Josie, or negative from our perspective. One of the ways that we can love every day is to dance. And I want to talk about some of the ways I found it helpful. Also, as a caveat, in reflection on Josie's focus this morning, I hope that this series is not a big to-do list for all of you, but rather perspectives on how we can live out love, which really I think is the only item on our to-do list. We are called to be and to do only love. And so I hope these different perspectives on love are helpful, not adding to the burden of what to do, but rather just different viewpoints on how we can love. So in thinking about dancing, one of the ways we can dance as a means of love is to hold plans loosely. Very early on in the pandemic, which is crazy to say, it was 3 calendar years ago, we got really dedicated to making grocery lists for exactly what we were going to eat each day, and we would make sure to buy these food items. And we've also, like my mom, tried the other people shop for us and bring us those things, and also tried going in the stores, all messed up, and finding what we need. And one of the things we found was that some items are just gone. It could be toilet paper. In most often in our experience, it was fresh greens. Like we had we in our house like to eat what we call big salads. It's just a giant salad with a whole bunch of good stuff on it. And it's really frustrating to try to make big salads when there are no greens. You have to get really creative. And so our plans were foiled in trying to do the best we could to make a plan to eat food that was nutritious, that we wanted to eat, and yet we couldn't find what we needed. It was a bit maddening. Over the last couple of years, we've since become more flexible, and what, we weren't planning on having beans today, but I guess we're having beans, or whatever the case may be. In James chapter 4, verses 13 to 15, it says, Come now, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go into such and such a town and spend a year there and trade and make a profit, yet you do not know what tomorrow will bring. What is your life? For you are a mist that appears for a little time and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will live and do this or that. When I was growing up, I encountered people who took this verse quite literally, and they would never say, I plan to do this, or I'm going to do this. They would say, Lord willing, I'm going to do this. And I don't think James here is trying to give us another thing to add to our to-do list about how we should talk about the future, but instead to recognize that ultimately our plans are flexible, that God willing, we might intend to do such and such a thing, but who knows what happened? A global pandemic might descend on us, and our spring break might never end. James compares our life to a mist, which I'm pleasured to live in the Ozarks and drive early in the morning. And these mists are amazing. They are absolutely beautiful. These low-hanging clouds that you drive through, and when you get into them, they're swirling and moving, and they seem to vanish very suddenly. I think maybe one of the things that makes mists most beautiful is they aren't solid. They are changing and flowing, and they lay in the lowlands and they disappear so quickly. It's a rare and beautiful sight to get to see the sun rising in the mists in the valley. And that is what our life is. It's fleeting, it's changing. And if anything, the last few years have shown us that. One of the ways I've adapted or danced through these changing times is to set an intention to follow God's lead for the day. We've stopped making plans pretty much for more than a couple of weeks out in our house, because who knows what's going to happen in a couple of weeks. Instead, we hold our plans loosely. But I think that every day we wake up with the intention to encounter whatever is, whatever happens that day. We choose to follow God's lead. And so last week I talked about setting intentions in the morning, and I would reiterate that this as a way we can dance and love through life is to set an intention. We can hold plans loosely and follow God's lead from moment to moment. We can also hold habits loosely. I've shared with my friend who's from Korea, but a couple of friends of mine who are married spent some time in Korea. And one of their traditions or their habits in their house is when you go into their house, you take off your shoes. It's just how they do. And it's a wonderful way to respect the boundary of the house, to keep the house clean. And if you didn't happen to bring your own house shoes with you, they even have guest house shoes that they clean regularly, so it's not yicky. But you really very much feel part of the home, part of the inner life when you take off your outside shoes and you step across the threshold into their family environment. It's lovely. And it's also not something that we enforce in our house. You can wear your shoes in our house or not. But when our Korean-based friends come to our house, they are insistent on taking off their shoes. And it's a lovely gesture to recognize the threshold of being on the inside of somebody's almost sacred space. In 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verses 19 to 23, with some bits taken out just for space, Paul says, "For though I am free from all, I have made myself a servant to all, that to those under the law I became as one under the law. To those outside the law, I became as one outside the law. I have become all things to all people for the sake of the gospel, that I might share with them in its blessings." What Paul is talking about here is adapting to the person you are in relationship with, to hold flexible your own habits and instead defer to the person in front of you. One of the ways this has looked during the pandemic is there was a time when we were very far apart from each other, and as we started to get closer together physically, we did not immediately resurrect the habit of handshakes or hugs, but we would do either fist bumps or this awkward elbow bump. Out of deference for the other person and their level of comfort with closeness, we changed our own personal habits to accommodate those people. And that's exactly what I believe this verse is talking about, to not hold your own habits as unbreakable laws, but instead to defer to the person in front of you. My dear sister is a vegan. which is not a person from the planet Vega, but a person who eats no animal products of any kind. And I love my dear sister and enjoy sharing meals with her. And so, what this looks like in practice is that sometimes I get the privilege of going over to her house for a meal that she spent hours preparing to eat some rather delicious food. But it often looks very different from what I would pick on any given day. This is a picture of a vegan burger, which, if you showed this to a hamburger lover, they would be confused, if not horrified, at what they're trying to eat here. But when we live out dancing in love with another person and holding our habits loosely, what this sometimes looks like is eating the vegan burger. It might not be the thing you order off the menu, but it is relationship building. It's deferring to the person in front of you and choosing to love them in very practical ways, to share a meal and not holding your own habits or preferences as the ultimate unbreaking authority. We can hold habits loosely to prioritize people over preferences. We can also anticipate changing situations. When I was an awkward adolescent, I used to love to go to school dances. It was my favorite thing, not because I love all the popular dances of the time, but because I love slow dancing. I know how to waltz and do several ballroom style dances, and I love to dance. And yet, for whatever reason, I never anticipated that oftentimes there would be a slow dance that I really enjoyed, and then immediately they would switch to a fast dance that was a popular dance. I had no idea how to move my body to it, and so I would just, well, I guess we're doing this now. And I was not prepared for the changing situation that rationally I knew I should have known was about to come. And so I would stand there as this poor awkward gentleman is doing with his date who maybe wants to dance as well. In Philippians chapter 4, verses 12 to 14, this is a very often cited verse. But in context, it says, I know how to be brought low, and I know how to abound. In any and every circumstance, I have learned the secret of facing plenty and hunger, abundance and need. I can do all things through him who strengthens me, yet it was kind of you to share my trouble. This often quoted verse is sometimes applied to radical things like being able to scale an impossibly high mountain or lift a car over my head. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. That's not what this verse is talking about. Paul here is talking about that regardless of the situation, I can adapt, I can handle it because God is with me. God strengthens me through these changing situations. And it actually reminds me of the celebration of Advent and Christmas, the God who is with us, who has been through difficult and changing, both good and bad situations. That is the God who is with us in all our situations. And so regardless of what situations come my way, I can handle it. And maybe that's how that verse should be translated. I can handle all situations through him who strengthens me. Again, not to edit. I guess we're in the habit of editing the Bible today, Laura. Not to edit Paul here, but maybe that would be an adequate translation as well. What this looks like in practice for my mental and emotional state is to view whatever situation I'm in as riding the waves. For whatever reason, like my adolescent self, I tend to think that whatever's going on at the moment, whatever my emotional state or whatever somebody else's response is, that's the way things are, period, permanently. Like this is reality. But we know that's not the case. Your emotions are going to change. Situations are going to change for our perceived good or ill. Other people's responses will change. We can view every situation very much like a surfer, that what's going on right now is certainly not going to be the way it is now. And we can just surf through this current situation because it will change. And that, for me, that's I hope, a mentally and emotionally healthy way to view our situation, whatever it is. It's not likely to stick around, good or bad. This is going to change. And so we can surf right along with those changes. We can anticipate changing situations and emotions and attitudes and love through them, regardless of what they are. So these are 3 ways that I found helpful to practice dancing through whatever comes our way, to set an intention to follow God's lead, to eat the vegan burger, even if it wouldn't be our personal preference, and to ride the waves, because we know it's all going to change. I am not a fan of country music, but I was reminded after looking through scriptures that talk about changes of a particular song by Leanne Womack that, based on these themes, it really came to mind. The lyrics go, "I hope you still feel small when you stand beside the ocean." We know things are going to change just like the ocean, and the whole world's not about us. We really are a small, hopefully, glimmer of love amidst change. Whenever one door closes, I hope one more opens. We recognize that over the last couple of years, our situations have changed quite radically from what we thought was going to be. And spoiler alert, they're going to change again. I don't know how, but I know our situations will change. Promise me that you'll give faith a fighting chance. And oftentimes we view faith as a set of beliefs, but I've come to see faith as trust that whatever comes our way, that we get to walk through it together, and that God will walk through it together with us as well. And when you get the choice to sit it out, to demand your own way, to cling to your own preferences, or dance, to love through changing situations, to hold your own preferences lightly, I hope you dance. So may we start our days with the intention to be flexible. May we prioritize people over preferences. May we anticipate that both good and bad situations will change. And may we ever dance to the rhythm of love.